Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to give folks just a couple of seconds to trickle in from the waiting room. We will get started in just about a minute. But in the meantime, so excited to have you here and really excited to get started with our guests today. Going to give folks just a little bit more time, seeing everybody coming in from the waiting room. Love it. We will kick off at 16 after the hour. So once my clock strikes 16, which it just did, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here. My name is Brinton, pronouns she, her. I work on the marketing team here at Handshake. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can get started and I can look my lovely guests in the eye. Hello. I am so excited to have you here because fall recruitment is in full swing, and we want to give folks the tools to be successful in a wide variety of career paths and industries. This fall, we're bringing in recruiters in different industries and disciplines to answer your questions and share more about what they're looking for in a candidate. Today's panelists are seasoned recruiters at General Mills, and they are going to be providing insights about making a good impression with hiring professionals in today's job market. So for the next 20 minutes or so, buckle up. We're going to have a structured conversation, but you can feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit questions throughout the session, and we will do our best to get to as many as we can in a short Q&A portion before we wrap today. Any questions that we don't answer today, we will use to inform future events and content, and so we're really excited to hear from you. As a reminder, you won't be able to see questions that are submitted until we mark them as answered, so please don't think we're ignoring you. We tend to get a lot. We will make our way through as many as we can. With those kind of housekeeping details out of the way, I would love to get started with our panelists. Marissa, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe give a bit of background on you and what you're working on at General Mills today?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Brinton, and thank you to everyone who joined. Super excited to be here. So I'm a senior recruiter with General Mills. I've been with General Mills for 9 years, and I've been in recruiting for 17 years, and everything from exec recruiting, experienced recruiting, internal movement, and now campus recruiting for the last 4 or 5 years, which is so much fun. I lead a campus recruiting for all of North America sales. That's both retail and food service sales, as well as food service marketing, digital and technology roles, and talent brand.
That's a really wide range of roles that you recruit for. I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but Jose, same intro prompt to you. Can you go ahead and give us some background on you and your role at General Mills?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, everybody. My name's José Díaz Aquino. I go with he, him pronouns, and I'm a diversity recruitment lead with General Mills, and I support all of North America, and I support both our campus teams and our experienced recruiting teams. So after you leave college, I'm also there once you start working to help you bring to General Mills. I actually started as an intern 16 years ago with General Mills as a quality and regulatory operations intern. My background is as a chemical engineer. I graduated from the University of Puerto Rico. I did that for the first 10 years of my career. I was in quality engineering / our supply chain, worked across 6 different plants, 3 different countries. Then I took a break from General Mills. I left for 5 years and went into higher education where I did recruiting and career development. So I helped students kind of figure out how to get jobs. And I did a master's in organizational leadership and came back 2.5 years ago to General Mills on the talent acquisition side, hiring for technical roles. And then a year and a half ago, I got into my current role.
That's awesome. I feel like there's a whole separate event thread to tug on there on your journey from intern to recruiter. But in the meantime, I would love to get started with, just some table stakes. Maybe Marissa, you can answer this for us. You mentioned the types of roles that you typically hire for, but can you talk a little bit about what the recruitment process looks like at General Mills? Particularly, you're in campus recruiting. So what does the typical process look like?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's hard to navigate. I know sometimes recruiting can feel like a bit of a black hole and like what's going on. So for just to ground us, experienced recruiting, of course, is when we hire individuals that have any years of experience, typically more than 1 to 2 years of experience. And those are hired for when someone either leaves the company or someone gets promoted and there's an open job and a manager works with the recruiter and that's live, like real-time hiring. They're needed immediately or as soon as possible, typically. of course, the biggest difference with campus recruiting is these are actually the only roles in the company that we can hire for a year in advance or more than a year in advance sometimes. So this process actually starts a year prior to us even recruiting for the role, where we really talk with the business and understand how many individuals we can hire, what the business is looking for in terms of requirements, or how we can help support the business and make impact. And then we start to set the strategy for what that looks like. And so typically we post all of our campus roles in early August, right after our internship ends. And then we are heavy recruiting for both internship and full-time positions. I would say September through November, December, and sometimes we go into spring recruiting. It depends on which roles, but that's pretty typical.
That's awesome. So we're in it. We are in
Right.
the game time. You guys
Yeah,
are really hitting the pavement
this is
here.
prime time.
Yes. Well, thank you for carving out time for us during this peak season.
Yes.
Jose, I would love to pivot a little bit into standing out to recruiters like yourself. I know that that's a question we get a lot from students during these sessions. And, I hear from students directly is, what recruiters are actually looking for from candidates in terms of their profiles. So whether it's Handshake, LinkedIn, kind of any way that you're showing up on a professional platform in front of somebody who wants to hire you. Do you have any green flags or red flags that you look out for while you're scoping out candidates?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to meet candidates. And when you're in your undergrad, the nice thing is a lot of companies are going to your campus. So meet people on campus, but you start your homework before that, right? So Handshake is a great place to be looking up companies and understanding what do they stand for, what jobs are they hiring for. I think the things that stand out the most is when students come to us and already have done research and they can talk to us about like, this is why I want that role. This is why I think my experience really matches up. And when I'm looking at LinkedIn or Handshake profiles, this is your opportunity where you don't have a one-page limit. So you can really put a lot of things in there. So you can put your experience, but then you can also put what type of initiatives you're in, clubs that you might be getting leadership through, things that you've done outside of the classroom, or even projects and things that you're really interested to highlight. It gives you so much more freedom. So that's going to be important when we're looking at your profile to understand, is this something that we can bring into General Mills and matches with our values as well?
I love that. Some of my favorite, I mean, I do a lot of scrolling on Handshake. Obviously, I work here. It's my job. But some of my favorite things that I see from students is when they share portfolio pieces on their profile, because it's able to, show a holistic view of who you are and what you're interested in and the things that you dabble in. So that's really great advice. Thank you. Marissa, did you have anything that you wanted to weigh in there as well?
I mean, I think that's great on how Jose answered that in terms of like the profile advice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that there are any like green or red flags necessarily. That was great.
Beautiful. Okay, well then let's segue into the application process. I would love to understand if there are any pieces of advice that you have for students when it comes to making a first impression, when it comes to their resume. So we hear a lot of questions about resumes. I think that's one of those topics where it's like, do I go creative and do something that's really fun to look at, or do I go very straightforward? When it comes to, you review hundreds of resumes a day. What are some specific elements that you look for? What are some things that stand out to you in a resume?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And, of course, there are people on the other end that are looking at your resume. And so it's probably a little bit subjective, but I also am really well connected in the recruiter community. And what I would say is very few people actually care about a super creative or like colorful template, right? Like we are really spending probably 30 to 60 seconds looking at your resume initially to understand if it essentially meets the minimum qualifications for the role that we're hiring for. And so I think the best things that you can do, of course, as Brinton mentioned, the resume is typically your first impression. So whatever you are putting at the top of your resume should be highlighting the minimum qualifications. So campus recruiting, think education right at the top, the year that you're graduating, what your major is, minor, et cetera, anything you want to highlight with education. And then right away next, if you want to put a highlight row, you can, or skills, you can, but pretty much next to be any experience that you have, any past internships or leadership roles, or anything applicable to the jobs that you're looking for. So as I mentioned, we look for minimum qualifications first. And so if there are specific roles you're really interested in, just look over that job description. We give it to you right there on the job description of like what we're looking for. And so you can have that right front and center at the top of your resume. Now you don't need to cater your resume to each job, but I think you probably know your top 5 companies or top 5 roles that you're typically looking for. So try to cater to that. And then I would say some additional tips are, instead of providing responsibilities for each of your role, provide accomplishments. So anything that you feel really stood out during, whether it was an internship or a class project or a part-time job that you work for, what was the impact that you made? What was the direct impact and what were those accomplishments? And then any data you can provide is great. So like numbers, or anything that really stood out during that time. And then I would say what we also look for, any leadership roles. So leadership in school, like a student organization, on a sports team, or any work experience. And then again, using data to share the direct impact within the leadership role. I
Yeah.
would also say try to stay away from like jargon, like spearheaded this project, just try to be as real as you can in terms of what you really did, and use keywords. Again, we're giving it to you on that job description. So use some of those keywords on the job description in your resume too.
That's smart. And I love your point about quantifying your impact in whatever role that you've participated in, whether it's a leadership role or any other job that you have in your background. That's something that I share with students a lot, is like, what is the data? How can you
Yeah,
really demonstrate what you've done in this role?
exactly. Yeah.
Jose, I'd love to hear, like, sorry to flip it to something a little bit negative, but are there any common mistakes that you see on resumes that you would want to warn our audience away from? We often get the question about having a picture on your resume. So that's something that I want to ask if you have any hot takes there.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, we're not looking at the picture, right? That's something that we're not going to take into account. And there's actually some employers, like if they're in a government agency, that they can't even accept something with a picture on it because of the different contracts that they have. So I would definitely steer away from that. Keep it clean and simple. I think sometimes we see paragraphs. Paragraphs are hard to read. Having, like Marissa said, just putting the job description that you had, that doesn't really tell us much. So I'd rather be able to know the story behind it. And I always think of the resume. Yes, it's the foot in the door for us, but it's also for a candidate. It prepares you for your interview. It prepares you for that conversation you're going to have in a job fair. So if you already have your top highlights from each job that you think match the job description, talk about a starting point for a conversation right there, right? So you can really use it for that. But if it's not set up that way because you just put a job description from somewhere else, that's not really going to help you differentiate yourself from another person who had a sales job or who had a job as an engineer somewhere, an intern, because that might be very similar job description, especially at the internship level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and super great advice. I want to, sorry to keep us moving along really quickly, but I just know that we're gonna want to make space for our Q&A. I know right now we're in peak college job fair and recruiting event season. You guys are involved in all of these events. Marissa, I know that you're doing tons of interviews right now too. Do you have any advice for job seekers to get the most out of these opportunities when it's particularly on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it depends a little bit about kind of what phase you're in right now, if you're really looking for an internship or a full-time, or if you're just kind of looking at companies. But I'll kind of speak to it as you're truly looking to get interviewed and receive an opportunity. This is your time to network, make connections, get a feel for the people at the company, usually the people that are at the career fair. If you are like, I could see myself hanging out with them. They seem like good people with good values. Take that into consideration. That's typically how it goes. And so this is truly your time to understand and figure that out. I would say definitely go to as many events as you can. Go to the smaller events where you get more of the intimate feeling and you can get that one-on-one connection. Definitely follow up at the career fair, especially for those companies that you're really interested in. I would look ahead of time and understand, okay, these are my top 5 companies that I know I want to visit and hit first. Get to know the individuals there. Some companies send recruiters, some people send business individuals or business leads from the function. And so there's a lot of different connects that you can make. And how I would say that you can get the most of your time, I'll say 5 top things. 1, have your elevator pitch ready at any event. So that is typically, hi, my name is this. I am a, whatever year you are in school, this is my major. I am looking for this role, and maybe something unique about yourself. Or maybe you have done a little bit of research on the company and you've already said, I looked at this position, I'm interested in this position, and here's why. So I would say 1 to 2 sentences off the bat. And then if you've gone a little extra deeper into the research, that really helps you stand out. Especially for those companies that you're looking for. I love when candidates come up to me and they're like, I found your role on the General Mills website. This is the one I'm interested in, and here's why. And then maybe you've already applied in advance. And so applying in advance is amazing too. That can let us know you're really interested, you've looked into it, and you're serious about it. Bring your resume, of course, so have that to hand out. We will want to look at that. And then I would say, almost more importantly, share a little something that makes you you. Like, we really want to understand we're not just hiring numbers, right? Like, we want to hire people. And so we want to understand what's unique about you, what do you love, what drew you to the company, what drew you to what industry you're even looking in. And so try to think about that. That will help you stand out as well.
I love that point about you're hiring people, not just numbers. So really authentically showing up as yourself is so important. And tacking on to some of your takeaways there around networking, Jose, do you have any advice for creating like lasting, meaningful connections in these kind of networking opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that Marissa said, right, like it depends on the company, but a lot of times you're going to have a functional expert or somebody from the business there at the career fairs, because especially if you have a technical role, we need to be able to assess that talent. So I always tell students, like, when I was in the engineering side talking to them, geek out with me, like, I know, like, I am 7 years ahead of you or more in this, so you can tell me about your project deep. And when we see people get really comfortable kind of geeking out about what they're doing, that excites us too, right? We get like, oh wow, that's really cool. I want to learn more about your project. If we're getting into that point of the conversation, I'm remembering you. If we just got super top level, then that's probably not a memorable experience. And I do remember people. I've been doing this for 16 years now. I remember people that came to the company and that we made offers, accepted, that we made offers didn't accept. I remember people that I told them, hey, maybe this is more like something you should be working on, and I connected with them and stay connected all years. So know that that is a person that you're talking to. So maybe have that conversation that lowers the bar for you to how prepared you need to be. It's more about knowing your stories.
I love that. And I want to talk about making it past that first application process, right? I know, Marissa, you mentioned before we started our call that you've been doing a lot of interviews this week. Do you have any advice for standing out to a recruiter during that first interview process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's back to the foundational aspects of interviewing, right? And so I already mentioned having your elevator pitch, that common question of tell me a little bit about yourself. We're really asking, what are you interested in school? What are you going after? What experience do you have? Tell us that in a nutshell. And yes, you can share your personality in that as well. But the best thing you can do to prep for your interviews is to look at the job description, right? Shocking. Go to the job posting on the website that you apply to and read through it. What are the responsibilities? What are the expectations? And you can actually start to think about in your life, ooh, what are some ways that I've demonstrated these things, whether it was at a part-time job or in a project in one of my classes, or maybe an internship that I had, and start to think about those different examples. And really, I write them down personally, but do it whatever way works best for you. And then of course, do that in that STAR format, in situation, task, action, and results, or whichever way you've been taught. I know there's a couple different acronyms, but that's really the way that we are assessing your answers. You can kind of jump around a little bit, but I would say most people tend to forget their result. So now is the time to brag about yourself. Definitely showcase your accomplishments. You can draw 5 to 6 examples from these job descriptions, and I guarantee you'll be able to use these stories or examples for multiple different interviews and questions. So have those ready to go. As I said, review the job description prior, and then of course, do some research on the company. And by research, I mean, yes, go to the website and look around a little bit, but maybe also look up some recent news articles and things like that just to see what's recent regarding the company, to draw some questions. And then I would say what's almost more important is start to understand what's important to you so you can have those questions ready. Is it important to you to have work-life balance or flexibility with remote work? Or that your projects are making an impact, or that you would be promoted shortly after your first year or so? You can ask those questions during an interview, and it's important to come with that so that if you do receive an offer, you have asked what you needed to ask as well. I always tell candidates, you're interviewing us just as much as we're interviewing you. And lastly, I would say bring your personality. Take a deep breath and just know that we are people too on the other side of the camera, or maybe you're in person interviewing, and it doesn't hurt to try to add a little bit of humor or uniqueness, a little bit of your own swag, personality to the interview. Make it a little fun. It breaks the ice, and it goes better for both sides.
I love that. Bringing your personality is so important. And speaking of personality and talking about yourself, Jose, I want to end kind of our structured conversation here with one of the most common questions that we get, which is, how do you actually answer, tell me about yourself in an interview without rambling or without completely missing the mark? Do you have any recommendations for folks who might be kind of being put in the position to answer that question for the first time in an interview setting?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, like, tell me about yourself doesn't mean give me a 15-minute monologue about where you're at, right? Like, most times you're going to be answering a question at the longest for 3 minutes. So if you're going past that and you're thinking, am I talking too much? You probably are. I think it's having the points that make you qualified, right? So already have a couple bullet points, like, this is my major, this is what I do. That's table stakes. We already kind of know that, but you might want to refresh that, and then be like, and these are some projects that I've been working on, or an internship that I had, and what I did that I think made me really qualified for this role, and why. And then always round it out with like that personal touch. So like, and I was really excited when I got the call back from General Mills because I really want to work in this space. Or I looked at some of the profiles of the people that are going to be interviewing me, and I saw this is the career progression they had that really matches what I want to do. This is where you could go into Handshake or LinkedIn and do some of that research, very personal. And we know that you've actually taken the time to look at that and are excited.
I love that. I wish I had had you to tell me I was talking for too long when I was in some of my first interviews when I was coming out of college. I want to do a super quick rapid fire with each of you. I'll just, quick gut reaction before we get into our Q&A. We've got a lot of good questions that have come in. Marissa, cover letter, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Jose, thank you note after an interview, yes or no?
It depends. I think I like them, but the reality is like we're probably not going to do very much with them.
Okay. Marissa, bringing paper resumes to an interview, good idea or unnecessary?
Yeah.
Do it. Okay, excellent. Let's move into Q&A. We've gotten some really great questions here. I'm going to go through and pick some that I'm seeing repeated a little bit. One of those things that I hear a lot, what would you recommend for students who are starting off their job application process with minimal professional experience? How should they convey their skills? Is it a good idea to include class projects? Marissa, I know you touched on this a little bit when it came to the resume structure, but do you want to speak to this a little bit more?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I just think about your life and things that you're proud of. That could be a student athlete and maybe being a leader within that program, or how you became to be a student athlete. Definitely use projects from classes, maybe some that you're particularly proud of, like a group project that had impact and why, or you were, again, if you were a leader in that space. If you're a part of a student organization, what are some, if there's different events that you organized or put on, or anything that made impact. Part-time work, whether it's related or not, I think that shows a lot that you are potentially working part-time or full-time or at any capacity through school. It shows a lot about who you are. And so I think, yeah, just thinking about some of those things that you're proud of throughout your life and how to format that in a way on your resume that showcases the impact.
Yeah, I think that's great. And we have a couple more questions in the same vein as well that we might be able to get to. But one that I'm seeing a couple of different flavors of in the Q&A box is it ever too late to look for internships? We're obviously in peak fall recruitment season. Marissa, you talked a little bit about how campus recruiting and these career fairs and hiring for current undergrad and graduate students is often the only time you can really, as a company, hire a year in advance. But is it ever too late to start looking for internships?
No, it's never too late. I mean, companies may fill up their internships and then people back out. And we're looking again in the spring or even closer to the internship starting. So no, it's never too late to reach out, connect, understand who has things available. Sometimes we're completely full and I have partners in recruiting at other companies that are still looking. So it's definitely, there's always opportunities.
What I would say there is like know where you want to go. So I think Marissa said earlier, and we all do it. Like we have our top 5 or 10 places, or we have like our dream job. Know their timeline, because not every timeline is the same. Not every company recruits the same way. So when you see somebody on campus, ask them like, hey, when do you normally hire people? When do you make offers, stuff like that? And if you're going to be considered, we'll be open with you. It's like, hey, we're here. We're going to be doing interviews this weekend or next week. We're going to be doing that. Expect to hear back from us, because not every company does it exactly the same way. So don't expect that everybody treats it the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing some questions for folks who are starting to think about wanting to work in spring or summer 2025. And I would, take Jose and Marissa's advice here, do research on the companies and organizations that you're interested in, the industries that you're interested in. Oftentimes industries have pretty specific recruitment timelines. If you're looking to get into finance or banking or, tech, they often have pretty rigid recruitment timelines, where others have rolling recruitment in a way that might be a little bit more forgiving. So your mileage may vary based on what you want to do, but I think you've gotten some great advice from Jose and Marissa here. This will be open to both of you. Resumes, do you recommend having an objective statement in your resume? Is that something that you guys actually read?
I think that's something that used to be what was the thing. So if like your parents or people who were before you, they might have like their resume. I think it all depends on what value it's adding. So the resume, you're going to keep it to 1 page normally at this level of experience in your career. So every word matters. I rather you do some of the stuff like, what is your education? What is the graduation date? What is your major? And then go into your experiences. That's going to tell me a lot more than putting an objective that's like a very broad statement there. Now, if you have something where you're like, I want to get a job here because of the work I've done or the passion I've had, or that could be impactful. So I think really you need to think about what specifically you're trying to get out of it. I would
Yeah, I
tend to say
agree.
no.
Yeah, I've rarely seen an objective where I'm like, oh, that was actually value added. Usually it's so general where it's like, yes, I know you're looking for a role because you applied for this position. But I'm probably scrolling right down to education and then your last couple experiences.
Yeah. I have one question here from a grad student who's wondering if you can give advice about whether it's better to apply for a full-time position or an internship, and which one might give you a better shot at a company that you really want to work for. Is it common to start as an intern? I know, Jose, you started as an intern, and now obviously you've grown your career quite a bit. But are there any best practices for somebody who's just really wants to get in the door?
Yeah, so General Mills, right? Like the easiest door for a college graduate is going to be through our campus recruiting. We actually do have both internships and full-time positions, but it'll be very clearly labeled as campus recruiting or internship. Whether you're an undergrad or a grad student, that's going to be your best route to get in and the best time to move in there. Here's the reality. Once it gets into experience recruiting, which is what Marissa explained, the difference between those later, we're normally looking at people with definitely at least 1 year, but usually 2 to 3 years of experience already for that first level of experience recruiting. So it's less likely that you're going to be competitive for that role. Now, there's a lot of graduate students who have experience before they go to their graduate program, so that can be different on a case-by-case basis.
Got it.
Yeah, I
Solid.
would highly recommend if there's a company you know you want, I would highly recommend getting an internship first. Most companies, General Mills makes offers to about 90% of our interns by the end of the summer. And so it's a really great way to be considered for that full-time position.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to squeeze in one more before we wrap today. We have a question about networking. In terms of networking online, do you recommend that students connect with recruiters or employees? And if so, what seniority level do you think they should try to connect with?
I think you can connect with both, yes and yes.
Mhm.
I think you probably want to stick to like a manager level or below for campus recruiting within the business. You can definitely reach out to the recruiter. And I would say if you reach out to a recruiter on LinkedIn, please have your specific questions ready or let them know which role you specifically replied or applied to. I get too many that are like, hi, can we have a quick call? If I'm in the middle of recruiting season, I know I don't have time for a quick call. So
Right.
I think it's like, hey, my name is so-and-so. I applied for this role. I'm really interested. Here's my resume. And then I will very likely get back to you. And then you can also reach out to other individuals within the business to say, hey, I'm really interested. I applied. I reached out to Marissa. Is there anything you can help provide me with more information? And have your questions ready, not just like open-ended questions, have the questions ready. But I don't recommend reaching out to higher level executives, no.
Got it. Makes a ton of sense. Thank you both so much. This time really flew by. I feel like I could have peppered you with questions for another half hour. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today, especially during such a busy season. For everybody in the audience, we're so excited to bring you more of these types of events in the future. So please, please, please fill out our post-event survey so that we know what you want to see, who you want to hear from, industries you're interested in. And in the meantime, you can go ahead and register for more events on our events page to see upcoming recruiter workshops and more. With that, thank you so much, Jose and Marissa, and everybody here. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your week.
Yeah, thank you. Bye,
Thank you
guys.
all.
Thank you.